Sometimes the most dangerous prophecies aren't the ones that promise destruction. They're the ones that make you believe you deserve the pain inflicted upon you. The crimson glow of the blood moon cast eerie shadows across the Ironvale Pack territory, and Sable wondered if tonight would finally be the night someone's cruelty went too far. Not that anyone would mourn an Omega who couldn't even produce a scent, the most basic identifier of wolf kind. No. They preferred the prolonged torture of daily reminders that she was an abomination, a stain on their proud lineage, a mistake the moon goddess herself must have regretted. She crouched in the narrow space beneath the storage shed, her knees pulled to her chest, counting the minutes until the evening meal ended. 4 years had crawled by since her 16th birthday. 4 years since she should have presented with her Omega scent, that sweet marker that would have at least given her a place in the hierarchy. Instead, she was scentless, a ghost among wolves who valued scent bonding above all else. Found the little phantom. A voice slithered through the darkness. Draven, the pack's head enforcer, blocked her escape route with his massive frame. At 28, he'd built a reputation for creative punishments, and his particular obsession with making Sable's life unbearable had become entertainment for the younger wolves. Still hiding like a coward? I'm not hiding. I'm waiting for my shift to begin. Sable kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Kitchen duty started at moonrise, the only task they'd give a scentless Omega, where she couldn't contaminate the pack bonds. Draven crouched down, his eyes glinting with malice. You know what tonight is, don't you? The Red Moon Summit. Every pack in the Northern Dominion will be here. He smiled, and it was the expression of a predator who'd cornered wounded prey, including the Crimson King himself. Sable's blood turned to ice. Valdris, the Unyielding, they called him the Alpha King, who'd conquered 7 territories in 3 years, who ruled the Northern Dominion with an iron fist, whose very name made seasoned warriors tremble. Rumors said he'd never taken a mate because his heart was as cold as winter stone, that he could kill with a glance, that his wolf form was so massive it blocked out the moon. The Alpha asked me to make sure you stay hidden during the summit, Draven continued, reaching in to grab her arm. His grip left bruises. Can't have visiting packs thinking Ironvale harbors defective wolves. Bad for our reputation. He dragged her out, shoving her toward the isolation cellars, underground chambers, where they locked wolves who'd committed grave offenses. No. Sable gasped, stumbling. Please. I'll stay in the kitchens. No one will see me, I swear. Your word means nothing, Phantom. He opened the heavy iron door, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. You'll stay here until the summit ends. 3 days should teach you your place. As he pushed her inside, Sable's grandmother Esme appeared from the shadows, her weathered face tight with worry. She hasn't eaten since yesterday, Draven. At least let me bring her food. The defect can survive on water. He slammed the door, and the lock clicked with terrible finality. In the suffocating darkness, Sable sank to the cold floor. Above her, she could hear the pack preparing for the summit music, laughter, the sounds of wolves who belonged. Esme's voice drifted through the small ventilation grate, barely a whisper. Hold on, little flame. Tonight everything changes, whether we're ready or not. Sable didn't understand what her grandmother meant. How could anything change when she'd been invisible her entire life? But as the blood moon rose higher, casting red light through the grate, something stirred deep in her chest, a sensation she'd never felt before, like a second heartbeat, awakening after years of silence. The prophecy, whispered in the old tongue that only Esme still spoke, echoed in her mind. When red moon rises and the scentless one wakes, the throne of wolves shall tremble and break. The Crimson King's arrival shattered the carefully orchestrated peace of the Red Moon Summit like a stone through glass. Valdris didn't enter the Great Hall, he conquered it. Every wolf in attendance felt the crushing weight of his dominance roll through the space like a physical force, pressing against their chests, demanding submission without a single word spoken. Sable felt it even in her underground prison, the power so immense it made the stone walls vibrate. Her newly awakened second heartbeat responded with a violent lurch, as if trying to break free from her ribcage. She pressed her hand against her chest, gasping at the pain and confusion flooding through her. Above, Alpha Garrick of Ironvale greeted the Crimson King with elaborate ceremony. Your Majesty, we are honored beyond measure by your presence. Our pack offers its absolute loyalty and, oh, where is she? Valdris's voice cut through the formalities like a blade through silk. Deep, resonant, and carrying an edge that made several wolves whimper involuntarily. Garrick faltered. Your Majesty? I don't understand. The scentless one. Valdris's silver eyes, so pale they appeared almost white, scanned the assembled crowd with predatory focus. I can feel her. Where are you hiding her? The great hall erupted in confused murmurs. How could the Crimson King possibly know about Sable? And why would he care about a defective Omega? Your Majesty must be mistaken, Garrick stammered, his face draining of color. We have no such... The temperature in the hall plummeted. Frost began forming on the windows as Valdris's power manifested physically. Something that shouldn't be possible. Do not, he said with deadly calm, insult me with lies. I have not traveled across 3 territories on the night of the red moon for pleasantries. Bring her to me, now. Draven stepped forward, his earlier confidence evaporated. Your Majesty, if you're referring to the Omega Sable, she is indisposed. Unworthy of your attention. We've kept her isolated to spare, visiting packs, the embarrassment. You've imprisoned her. It wasn't a question. Valdris moved with inhuman speed, crossing the hall to stand directly before Draven. The enforcer, who'd terrorized Sable for years, trembled like a leaf. You've locked her underground, in darkness, without food. His head tilted slightly, an eerily predatory gesture. Interesting choice, considering the prophecy. Every wolf in the hall stiffened. The prophecy was forbidden knowledge, something the Council of Alphas had tried to bury centuries ago. The fact that the Crimson King spoke of it openly sent waves of fear through the assembled packs. Take me to her, Valdris commanded, or I will tear this territory apart stone by stone until I find her myself. The procession to the isolation cellars was a funeral march. Garrick led the way, his hands shaking as he fumbled with the keys. Behind them, dozens of wolves followed, unable to resist witnessing whatever was about to unfold. Whispers spread like wildfire. The scentless Omega. The prophecy. The Crimson King's interest. What could it mean? When the cellar door opened, Sable squinted against the sudden torchlight, her eyes having adjusted to complete darkness. She saw boots first, polished black leather, then gradually looked up to see him. Valdris the Unyielding stood at the top of the stairs, and he was nothing like the monster she'd imagined. He was younger than the rumors suggested, perhaps 25, with angular features that belonged on ancient statues of war gods. His hair was black as a moonless night, his skin marked with silver scars that caught the light like constellation maps. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath. Those impossible silver eyes that saw through flesh and bone to something deeper. Their gazes locked, and the world tilted on its axis. Valdris descended the stairs slowly, his massive frame somehow graceful despite the confined space. Everyone else faded to background noise as he approached. Sable tried to scramble backward, but her body wouldn't respond to her commands. That second heartbeat thundered now. So loud she was certain everyone could hear it. You. Valdris breathed, stopping just inches from where she sat on the cold floor. Something flickered across his face. Shock, recognition, and something that looked terrifyingly like dread. It's you. Huh. I don't understand, Sable whispered, her voice hoarse from disuse. The prophecy spoke of a scentless Omega who would rise under the red moon. His jaw clenched, muscles jumping beneath his skin. An Omega who carries the power to destroy everything I've built. The Oracle told me I would find her tonight, and that recognizing her would be the beginning of my end. The cellar fell into absolute silence. Even breathing seemed to stop as the implications settled over everyone present. So why did you come? Sable asked, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. Why seek your own destruction? Valdris's expression shifted into something complex, part resignation, part defiance, and underneath it all, a hint of desperate curiosity. Because the same oracle who prophesied my downfall also told me something else. He reached down, offering his hand. She said you would be the only thing in this world worth losing everything for. Sable stared at the outstretched hand, like it might dissolve into smoke if she touched it. Around them, the wolves of Ironvale Pack stood frozen in various states of shock and horror. Their Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the Northern Dominion, was offering his hand to the Omega they'd spent years treating as less than nothing. "Don't touch him!" Garrick lunged forward, his survival instinct warring with his terror of Valdris. "Your Majesty, she's contaminated, defective. Whatever the prophecy says, she cannot be." Valdris didn't even look at him. His hand remained extended towards Sable, steady and patient. But his voice, when he addressed Garrick, carried the weight of absolute authority. "Speak another word about her, and I'll remove your tongue before your throat." The threat wasn't empty. Everyone in the cellar knew it. Garrick stumbled backward, his face ashen. Quote, "You're afraid," Sable observed, studying Valdris's face. She'd spent years learning to read micro-expressions, the only survival skill available to someone who couldn't rely on scent communication. "Not of me. Of what I represent." "Terrified," Valdris admitted, and the honesty in his voice sent ripples of shock through the watching crowd. The Crimson King feared nothing. It was fundamental truth, like the sky being blue. Yet here he stood, confessing fear to a scentless Omega in a cellar. "I've conquered territories, defeated alpha legacies that stood for centuries, built an empire that will outlast my lifetime. And the Oracle tells me you'll bring it all crashing down. Then why are you helping me?" Sable still hadn't taken his hand. "Why not kill me while I'm weak? End the threat before it begins." "I tried." The confession hit like a thunderclap. Valdris's jaw tightened, and for a moment, rage flashed across his features, but it was directed inward. "3 times I've sent assassins to Ironvale over the past year, paid fortunes, to ensure they'd complete the task quietly, so you'd never know I was coming for you." Horror and understanding dawned on Sable simultaneously. The 3 mysterious deaths in Ironvale wolves, found torn apart in ways that suggested they'd fought something far more powerful than themselves. The pack had assumed rogue attacks. "But now, they came for me," she whispered, "and something killed them first." "Something protected you." Valdris's silver eyes held a mixture of frustration and unwilling respect. Each assassin was the best in their field. "They shouldn't have failed, but each time I sent someone, they'd be found dead within miles of your location, killed by what appeared to be." He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "By their own power, turned against them. As if whatever force guards you simply reflected their intent back upon them." Esme's voice drifted from somewhere behind the crowd of onlookers. "The scentless ones are guarded by the old magic, the kind that predates pack structures and alpha dominance. You cannot kill what the earth itself has chosen to shield." "Your grandmother speaks truth," Valdris said, his hand still extended. "After the 3rd failure, the Oracle came to me in a dream. She showed me 2 paths: continue trying to kill you, and watch my empire crumble to dust within the year. Or," he took a breath, "come here on the red moon, acknowledge what you are, and face whatever destiny has planned." "That's insane," Draven burst out from his position near the stairs. "You're the Crimson King. You don't bow to prophecies, or—" He didn't finish the sentence. Valdris moved with supernatural speed, his hand closing around Draven's throat and lifting him off the ground without apparent effort. "This Omega," Valdris said quietly, his voice somehow more terrifying in its calmness, "has endured your cruelty for how long?" Draven's face was turning purple, but he managed to choke out, 4 years. 4 years. Valdris's grip tightened. "And in that time, did you ever wonder why a scentless Omega survived? Why someone so supposedly weak wasn't killed by the challenges you inflicted? On time?" He leaned closer. "Or did you just enjoy the power trip too much to question it?" He released Draven, letting him collapse, gasping to the floor. Then Valdris turned back to Sable, his expression softening in a way that seemed to surprise even him. "I came here expecting to find a weapon. Something dangerous wearing an innocent face. But you're not what the prophecy made you seem." "What am I then?" Sable asked, her voice barely audible. "Starving. Exhausted. Terrified." He moved his hand slightly closer. "And still brave enough to question why your prophesied destroyer is offering you help. That's unexpected." Something in his tone, in the genuine confusion and reluctant admiration there, made Sable's decision. She reached up and placed her hand in his. Power. The moment their skin touched, Red lightning exploded through the cellar. Not metaphorical, actual crimson electricity that arced from their joined hands to score marks into the stone walls. Every wolf present was thrown backward by the force of it, their bodies slamming into walls and stairs, as Pry says. Even Valdris staggered, though he maintained his grip on Sable's hand. When the light faded, Sable stood on her own feet for the first time in 3 days, supported by Valdris's arm around her waist. Her body hummed with energy she'd never felt before. That second heartbeat had synchronized with something vast and ancient, pulling power from sources she didn't understand. And for the first time in her life, Sable had a scent. It flooded the cellar, overwhelming and impossible to ignore. Blood roses and burning cedar, night storms and forged steel. The scent of prophecy itself. Impossible, Garrick whispered from where he'd been thrown against the far wall. She was scentless. She was nothing. She was the most dangerous wolf in the Northern Dominion. Valdris finished, his voice carrying equal parts dread and something that sounded disturbingly like pride. And apparently, my fated mate. The great hall of Ironvale had been transformed into something resembling a war room. Valdris had commandeered the space without asking permission. And no one, not even Garrick, dared protest. Sable sat in what had been the Alpha's chair, still trying to process the fact that she could smell now. Privis. Every scent in the room overwhelmed her unpracticed senses. Fear, anger, confusion, and underneath it all, Valdris's scent, winter pine and ancient iron. Dominance and something else she couldn't name. Esme stood beside her, one weathered hand resting on Sable's shoulder. "It's time," the old woman said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "Time for the truth about what was done to this child." "Esme, don't," Garrick started, but Valdris silenced him with a look. "Speak," the Crimson King commanded. He'd taken a position near the windows, backlit by the blood moon's crimson glow. "I want to hear everything." Esme's eyes, clouded with age but sharp with memory, surveyed the assembled wolves. 21 years ago, an oracle came to Ironvale. She was dying, her gift burning through her body as prophecies often do to those who carry them. She came seeking the Alpha, bearing a vision that would change everything. The room held its collective breath. Prophecies were rare, and prophecies delivered by dying. Oracles were considered absolute truth, unavoidable fate, written in the stars themselves. She told Alpha Merrick Garrick's father that a child would be born in Ironvale under the next red moon. This child would carry the old magic, the kind that existed before wolves learned to walk upright, before pack structures and hierarchies. Esme's grip on Sable's shoulder tightened. The oracle said this child would grow to challenge the very foundation of pack law, that she would have the power to destroy any alpha who tried to dominate her, and that under her influence, the entire structure of wolf society would crumble. "The Thronebreaker," someone whispered. "Yes," Esme nodded. But there was more to the prophecy. The oracle said that this child would only come into her power if she was recognized by her fated mate, a king who would have to choose between his empire and his heart. She said the child would be scentless until that moment, hidden from those who might kill her before she could fulfill her purpose. Valdris pushed off from the wall, his body tense. And instead of accepting this prophecy, Alpha Merrick tried to prevent it. He did worse than try. Esme's voice hardened. "When my daughter Vera went into labor during the Red Moon 21 years ago, Merrick was there. He watched as Sable was born, watched as the midwives confirmed she had no scent. He knew immediately she was the prophesied child." Sable's breath caught. She'd been told her mother died in childbirth, that there were complications, but the way Esme's voice cracked suggested a different truth. "He ordered the midwives to smother the baby," Esme continued, and gasps echoed through the hall. "Said it was mercy, saving the packs from prophecy's threat. But Vera, my beautiful fierce daughter, fought them even as she bled out. She grabbed Sable and ran, made it as far as the forest edge before Merrick's enforcers caught her." Tears streamed down the old woman's face now, but her voice remained steady. Vera knew she was dying, so she did the only thing she could. She called on the old magic, the power that runs in our bloodline back to the first wolves. She bargained her life for her daughter's protection. The earth itself answered, wrapping Sable in a shield that would turn any murder attempt back on the murderer. "The reflective curse," Valdris said quietly. "That's why my assassins died by their own power." "Yes," but Vera's bargain came with conditions. Esme looked at Garrick, her expression holding decades of carefully controlled rage. Sable would survive, but she would have to stay in Ironvale, close to where the bargain was made. And the pack would have to keep her alive. Not comfortable, not safe, just alive until her fated mate recognized her. So you tortured her instead, Valdris's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. Couldn't kill her, so you made her wish she was dead. Garrick found his voice finally. We did what we had to. The prophecy said she would destroy any alpha who tried to dominate her, Esme interrupted. So you spent 4 years dominating her in every way possible short of death. You absolute fools. Don't you understand? Every cruelty you inflicted, every humiliation, every moment you made her feel worthless, you were fueling the very power you feared. Sable stood abruptly, the chair scraping against stone. Her newly awakened senses were overwhelmed, but through the chaos, one truth crystallized with perfect clarity. You killed my mother. You tried to kill me, and when that failed, you spent years trying to break my spirit instead. Sable. Garrick began, but she cut him off. Don't. Power rippled through her voice, something primal and ancient that made every wolf in the room feel their own dominance waver. Don't speak to me. Don't look at me. Don't pretend now that you have any right to address me at all. She turned to Valdris, who watched her with an expression that was impossible to read. You said I would destroy your throne. Is that what you think I'll do? Tear down your empire out of spite? I don't know what you'll do, Valdris admitted. The prophecy isn't clear on the how or why. Just that my recognition of you begins a chain of events that ends with my throne in ruins. Good, Sable said, surprising herself with the venom in her voice. Because I've spent my entire life under someone's thumb, being told I was worthless, being treated like a mistake that needed correcting. If your throne is built on the same foundations as Ironvale's hierarchy, then maybe it deserves to fall. Instead of anger, something like respect flickered across Valdris's face. Perhaps it does. He moved toward her with that predatory grace, stopping just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. But if you're going to destroy my empire, you'll need to be stronger than this. Right now, you can barely stand without shaking. Your power is raw, undisciplined. You have a scent, but you don't know how to control it. Every emotion broadcasts to everyone in the room. He was right. Sable could feel her fear, her anger, her confusion rolling off her in waves that affected the wolves around her. Some were backing away. Others drawn closer against their will. I can't train you, Valdris continued. My methods are designed for dominance, for forcing submission. That won't work on someone whose power specifically destroys dominance. He looked at Esme. But her grandmother can. The old magic runs in her blood too. You're asking me to make her strong enough to destroy you, Esme said slowly. I'm acknowledging that the prophecy will unfold regardless of what I want. Valdris's jaw clenched. So I'm choosing to ensure that when it happens, she's strong enough to survive what comes after. Because if she destroys my throne and isn't ready for the power vacuum that creates, he shook his head, the Northern Dominion will tear itself apart. Thousands will die in the chaos. Sable studied him, this king who'd tried to have her assassinated, but was now planning her training. Powers. Why do you care if thousands die? I thought you were the unyielding, the conqueror who shows no mercy. I am what I had to be to survive, Valdris replied quietly. Just like you are what Ironvale forced you to become. But the difference between us is that I built my empire on strength and fear, because it was the only language the alphas understood. You. His silver eyes met hers. You have the chance to build something different, something better. If you survive long enough to learn how. Training began at dawn, though Sable barely slept through the night. Valdris had claimed the entirety of Ironvale's northern training grounds, effectively taking over the pack's operations without a formal challenge. No one protested. The Crimson King's dominance was absolute, and the pack wolves scattered like leaves before a storm whenever he passed. Esme led Sable to a clearing deep in the forest, far from watching eyes. The old woman moved with surprising energy, as if revealing the truth had lifted a weight from her shoulders. The old magic doesn't respond to force, she explained, drawing symbols in the dirt with a gnarled stick. It responds to necessity, to survival, to the fundamental truth of what you are. And what am I? Sable asked, still struggling with the reality that she was no longer scentless, no longer nothing. You are the Earth's answer to corruption. Esme's eyes glowed faintly gold the first time Sable had ever seen evidence that her grandmother was more than she appeared. For centuries, pack structure has grown more rigid, more cruel. Alphas dominating betas, betas dominating deltas, everyone crushing the omegas beneath them. The old magic, the power that created wolves in the first place, has been watching, waiting for the right moment to course correct. End quote. By destroying the hierarchy entirely? By giving someone the power to choose. Esme tapped Sable's chest, right over her heart where that second heartbeat still pulsed. You can destroy any alpha who tries to dominate you, yes, but that's not your only option. You can also choose to work with those who approach you as equals. That the prophecy isn't about tearing down every throne, it's about forcing change on those who refuse to evolve. A understanding dawned slowly. Valdris's throne falls only if he continues ruling through dominance alone. Exactly, Esme smiled. The oracle told him he'd lose everything, but what she meant was he'd lose everything he built on fear and submission. If he learns to lead differently, to build a new kind of empire, she shrugged, then perhaps his throne transforms rather than crumbles. That's the choice prophecy offers him. Does he know this? The oracle told him. Whether he truly heard it is another question. Esme began drawing more complex symbols. Now, we focus on you. Close your eyes. Feel that second heartbeat. That's not your wolf. Wolves don't have two heartbeats. That's the old magic. The power your mother bargained her life to give you. Sable closed her eyes, focusing inward. The second heartbeat pulsed steadily, and now that she was paying attention, she could feel it connecting to something vast beneath her feet. Like roots spreading through the earth, touching every living thing in the forest. Good, Esme murmured. Now push your awareness through those connections. Don't force it, let it flow naturally. The moment Sable stopped trying to control the sensation, it exploded outward. Her consciousness spread through the forest in a rush that would have been terrifying if it didn't feel so fundamentally right. She could feel every tree, every blade of grass, every creature that called this forest home. She was connected to all of it, part of a network so vast and ancient that her individual existence seemed impossibly small in comparison. Now, Esme's voice came from very far away. Call on that power, not to destroy, just to manifest. Show me what the old magic looks like through you. Sable reached for the power instinctively, and the forest responded. Vines erupted from the ground around her, growing at impossible speed. Flowers bloomed in seconds, their petals the same crimson as the blood moon. The earth itself seemed to pulse with energy, and Sable felt rather than saw her body beginning to glow with soft red light. Beautiful, someone said. And Sable's eyes snapped open to find Valdris standing at the clearing's edge. He'd approached in complete silence, watching her break through without interference, and utterly terrifying. The power dissipated immediately, the vines retreating, the glow fading. Sable stumbled, and Valdris moved with inhuman speed to catch her before she fell. His arms around her felt safe and dangerous in equal measure. How long were you watching? Esme demanded, her tone sharp. Long enough to understand why the oracle called her the Thronebreaker. Valdris helped Sable regain her footing, but didn't immediately release her. That power, it's not just defensive. If she wanted to, she could have commanded those vines to crush every building in Ironvale, could have drained the life from every wolf who ever hurt her. But I didn't. Sable said, pulling away from his embrace, even as her body protested the loss of contact. The mate bond, newly awakened, made proximity to him addictive. I don't want to destroy for the sake of destruction. I know. Valdris's expression was unreadable. That's what makes you truly dangerous. If you were simply violent, simply vengeful, I'd know how to handle you. But you have power that could reshape the world, and you're choosing restraint. That's unprecedented. Is that why you're really here? Sable challenged. To see if I'm the monster you expected? I'm here because watching you come into your power is the most magnificent thing I've ever witnessed. And I'm trying to reconcile that with the fact that you're prophesied to destroy me. He stepped closer. And Sable's new senses were overwhelmed by his scent, by the way her body responded to his proximity. I'm here because you're my fated mate, and apparently, I'm the kind of fool who can't stay away even knowing how this ends. You don't know how it ends, Esme interjected. The prophecy speaks of my throne falling, Valdris interrupted. I've accepted that. What I haven't accepted is that I should run from it. His silver eyes locked onto Sable's. So I'm making a choice. I'm going to teach you everything I know about ruling, about power, about the Northern Dominion's politics. I'm going to make you strong enough to survive the chaos that comes when an empire falls. Why? Sable breathed. Because if my empire is going to crumble, I want to ensure something better rises from its ashes. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his hand. The touch sent electricity racing through her veins. And because you're my mate, and apparently that means more to me than my throne ever did. Who knew I had that particular weakness? The bitter self-mockery in his voice made Sable's heart clench. This powerful, terrifying king was as trapped by prophecy as she was forced to choose between his life's work and the mate bond neither of them had asked for. What if there's another way? Sable asked suddenly. What if the prophecy is about change, not destruction? What if your throne doesn't have to fall if it transforms into something different? Valdris's hand dropped away from her face. Pretty thoughts. But I know what I am, what I've built. My empire runs on dominance and strength, power. That's the only language Pack Alphas understand, kind of. Then maybe it's time they learned a new language, Sable said, with more confidence than she felt. Maybe that's what the prophecy really means. Not that I'll destroy you, but that together we'll destroy the old ways and build something better. For a long moment, Valdris just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed a real laugh, not the bitter sound from before. You've been awakened to your power for less than a day, and you're already planning to revolutionize Pack society. That's either inspiring or insane. Maybe both, Sable admitted, but I spent years being crushed by the current system. If I have the power to change it, shouldn't I try? Even if trying means destroying everything I've built? Especially then, she said firmly. Because what you've built is impressive, but it's built on the same foundations as Ironvale. And look what Ironvale became, a place where they torture children because prophecy scared them. The truth of her words hung in the air between them. Valdris's jaw clenched, and for a moment, Sable thought he might argue. Instead, he nodded slowly. You're right. And I hate that you're right. He looked at Esme. Continue her training. Make her strong enough to survive what's coming. Because whether my throne transforms or crumbles, the Northern Dominion is about to change forever. 3 days after her awakening, Sable stood before the assembled wolves of Ironvale and made a choice that would echo across the Northern Dominion. Valdris had called for a formal gathering every pack member required to attend, with representatives from neighboring packs invited to witness. The great hall overflowed with bodies, the air thick with tension and curiosity. Garrick stood to the side, his position as Alpha suddenly uncertain now that the Crimson King had effectively taken over his territory. The former leader of Ironvale looked diminished, his authority stripped away by the presence of true power. Sable wore a dress Esme had produced from somewhere deep crimson silk that caught the light like liquid rubies. It was the first time in her life she'd worn anything beautiful, and the transformation was jarring. She barely recognized herself in the mirror, this creature with power radiating from her skin, with a scent that made wolves instinctively bow their heads. Wolves of Ironvale. Valdris's voice carried across the hall with supernatural clarity. You've lived for 4 years with a lie. You were told Sable was defective, scentless, worthless. You were encouraged to treat her as less than nothing. His silver eyes swept the crowd, and many wolves couldn't meet his gaze. You were told these things because your alpha feared the prophecy she represented, because your leaders chose cruelty over courage. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some wolves looked ashamed, others angry at being called out, still more confused about where this was leading. Today, Valdris continued, the Omega you spent years tormenting will make a choice. She can choose to remain in Ironvale, to forgive your treatment of her and continue as a member of this pack. He paused, letting the weight of that possibility sink in. Or she can choose to leave, to reject the pack that rejected her, and forge her own path. All eyes turned to Sable. She felt their attention like a physical weight, The same wolves who'd watched Draven break dishes and blame her, who'd laughed as she was denied food, who'd stepped over her unconscious body after training accidents that were anything but accidents. She thought of her mother, Vera, who'd died protecting her. Thought of Esme, who'd stayed in this hostile place for 21 years, keeping Sable alive through sheer stubborn will. Thought of every moment of humiliation, every night spent hungry, every morning waking up wondering if today would break her completely. "I have something to say first," Sable announced, her voice steady despite her racing heart. She stepped forward, away from Valdris's protective proximity. 4 years ago, when I turned 16 and presented as scentless, I thought I was broken. I believed what you told me, that I was defective, that my existence was a burden, that I deserved the treatment I received. Draven shifted uncomfortably near the back of the hall. Several other wolves who'd made her life miserable couldn't meet her eyes. "I was wrong," Sable continued. "Not broken, just different. Not worthless, just hidden. Not weak, just waiting." She let her power surface slightly, just enough that the air around her shimmered with red light. Several wolves stepped back instinctively. "Every cruelty you inflicted, you told yourselves you were putting me in my place. But really, you were revealing your own fears. Because deep down, you knew. You knew that someone who survived what you did to me couldn't possibly be as powerless as you wanted to believe." "Sable," Garrick started, but she silenced him with a look that made the alpha flinch. "I'm not finished." Power thrummed in her voice now, undeniable and absolute. "For 4 years I endured. I survived. I learned to read people because I couldn't rely on scent. I learned to anticipate violence because I couldn't defend myself. I learned to find value in myself even when everyone around me said I had none." She looked directly at Garrick now. "You tried to break me. Instead, you forged me into something you can't control." The hall was absolutely silent. Even Valdris watched her with an expression that was equal parts pride and concern, as if he was seeing her potential fully realized and understanding for the first time what the prophecy really meant. "So here's my choice," Pa Sable said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I reject Ironvale. I reject the pack that killed my mother, that tried to kill me, power, that spent years making me wish I was dead." She pulled the small iron pendant from around her neck, the only thing that marked her as a member of Ironvale pack, and let it fall to the floor. The metallic clang echoed like a death knell. Gasps erupted throughout the hall. Pack rejection was serious. It meant severing all bonds, all protections, all connections. A wolf who rejected their pack became essentially rogue, vulnerable to challenges from any territorial pack they encountered. "Furthermore," Sable continued, her power building now, the red light around her intensifying, "I claim the right of grievance challenge. Any wolf in Ironvale who participated in my torment, who stood by while I suffered, who benefited from the hierarchy that crushed me, I challenge them to acknowledge their actions or face judgment." "You can't," Garrick began, but Valdris cut him off. "She can," the Crimson King said firmly. "The right of grievance challenge is ancient law, predating pack structure. Any wolf who's suffered systematic abuse can invoke it. The challenged wolves must either publicly acknowledge their wrongdoing and accept punishment, or face the challenger in combat." Panic spread through the hall like wildfire. How many wolves had participated in Sable's torment? Dozens, at least. And now she was calling them all to account. Draven stepped forward first, his face pale but set with determination. "I accept your challenge, Sable. I won't hide from what I did." He knelt, a gesture of submission that looked physically painful for an enforcer to make. "I tormented you for years, made your life hell because it made me feel powerful. I was wrong, and I accept whatever judgment you decide. No one tells stories, but if you Tarians to program." One by one, others came forward. Some looked genuinely remorseful, others simply terrified of facing her in combat. Younger wolves who'd followed Draven's example, kitchen staff who'd denied her food, trainers who'd accidentally injured her. Within an hour, 43 wolves knelt before her, acknowledging their participation in her suffering. Power, but not Garrick, crasted. The alpha stood rigid, his pride warring with his fear. "I did what I thought was necessary," he said finally. The prophecy. The prophecy said I would destroy any alpha who tried to dominate me, Sable interrupted. So you spent 4 years dominating me in every possible way, guaranteeing that I'd see you as an enemy when my power awakened. You fulfilled your own fears. She stepped toward him, and he stumbled backward. You could have raised me with kindness, could have prepared me for my destiny with wisdom and guidance. Instead, you taught me that alphas are tyrants who must be stopped. But have. What do you want from me? Garrick's voice cracked. I want you to step down, Sable said simply. Ironvale needs a new alpha, someone who won't rule through fear and cruelty. Someone who understands that strength comes in many forms. Never one for spotter. You can't force me to abdicate. Quote, she's not forcing anything, Valdris interjected. She's offering you a choice. Step down willingly, or she'll challenge you for the position. And we both know how that fight would end. The threat hung in the air. Garrick looked around the hall desperately, searching for support, but found only averted eyes. Even his most loyal followers understood which way the wind was blowing. Fine, he spat finally. I step down. But you're making a mistake, bringing old magic into pack politics. This will destroy everything the Northern Dominion has built. Good, Sable said with quiet conviction, because what you've built isn't worth saving. She turned to face the assembled wolves, this pack that had been her prison for so long. For those who knelt and acknowledged their actions, I offer redemption. Work to build a better Ironvale, one where no wolf suffers as I did. Teach the next generation that different doesn't mean lesser. Prove through your actions that you've learned from your cruelty. And for those who didn't kneel? Someone asked nervously. You have until the next full moon to either acknowledge your actions, or leave Ironvale permanently, Sable declared. This pack is done crushing those it deems weak. She turned finally to Valdris, who watched her with an expression she couldn't quite read. I'm ready to leave now. Take me to wherever the next part of this prophecy unfolds. You don't want to stay and rebuild Ironvale? Valdris asked. No. Sable looked around the hall one last time. I want to prevent other packs from becoming like this one. I want to transform the system that made Ironvale possible in the first place. She met his eyes. I want to break thrones and build something better. Starting with yours. A slow smile spread across Valdris's face. Not the predatory expression she'd seen before, but something genuine and almost excited. Then let's begin. The Crimson Court. Valdris's seat of power was nothing like Sable had imagined. She'd expected a fortress dripping with intimidation, all sharp edges and oppressive architecture. Instead, the palace complex sprawled across a mountain valley, like a sleeping dragon, elegant rather than brutal, powerful in its sophistication rather than its threat. It's beautiful, Sable breathed as their convoy approached through the mountain pass. It's strategic, Valdris corrected, though his tone suggested he appreciated her reaction. Every building positioned to provide maximum defensive coverage. Every window reinforced with silver-laced glass. Every garden planted with wolfsbane and silver sage to prevent unauthorized shifters from approaching. Can't it be both beautiful and strategic? He glanced at her, something softening in his expression. I suppose it can. I've spent so long thinking in terms of pure utility that I forget others might see different qualities. The convoy consisted of Valdris's personal guard, 20 of the most dangerous-looking wolves Sable had ever seen, plus Esme, who'd insisted on accompanying them. The old woman rode in comfortable silence, her knowing eyes watching everything with interest. As they passed through the main gates, wolves began emerging from buildings and training yards. Word of Sable's existence had clearly spread because they didn't look surprised, just intensely curious. Unlike Ironvale's wolves, who'd stared with contempt and disgust, these wolves looked at her with something closer to awe. They're scared of me, Sable realized. They're respectful, Valdris corrected. There's a difference. Fear makes wolves dangerous, unpredictable. Respect makes them thoughtful. He helped her down from the vehicle with a gentleness that contradicted his fearsome reputation. Welcome to Crimson Court, Sable. Try not to destroy it immediately. The half-joke made her smile despite her nerves. Over the past few days of travel, she'd discovered that Valdris had a dry sense of humor buried beneath his intimidating exterior. He wielded sarcasm like a weapon, but occasionally deployed it for something closer to actual humor. Her quarters were in the palace's eastern tower, A suite of rooms that could have housed Ironvale's entire Omega population comfortably. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the valley. Bookshelves lined every wall. The bed was ridiculous, easily large enough for 5 people, draped in deep crimson and silver fabrics. Pata. This is too much, Sable protested as Valdris showed her around. Perfect. This is the Queen's suite, he replied casually, then seemed to realize what he'd said. I mean, it's traditionally reserved for the Alpha King's mate. Since we're... He trailed off, uncharacteristically flustered. Since I'm your fated mate who's prophesied to destroy your throne. Sable finished for him. That. He recovered his composure. Yes, look, I know the mate bond complicates things. You didn't choose this any more than I did. But pack law and tradition say that acknowledged mates share quarters, and I can't blatantly disregard that without weakening my position. So we're roommates? The absurdity of it made her want to laugh. The Crimson King and the Thronebreaker playing house? The suite has multiple bedrooms, Valdris said stiffly. You'll have complete privacy. I need to maintain certain appearances. The alphas who swear loyalty to me are already questioning my judgment after I claimed a scentless Omega as my mate. If I also refuse to follow basic mate protocols, I'll lose what little authority I have left. Sable studied him, this powerful king who suddenly seemed vulnerable. You're barely holding your empire together, aren't you? Perceptive. He moved to the windows, looking out over his domain. The prophecy spreading didn't help. Half my alphas think you're a weapon I'm trying to use against them. The other half think I've gone soft, that the mate bond has compromised my judgment. He glanced back at her. They're not entirely wrong about that second part, Pin. What do you mean? I mean that before I met you, I would have executed anyone who threatened my throne without a second thought. Now I'm actively training my own destroyer and hoping we can somehow transform the system rather than burning it down. His laugh was bitter. Quote, the mate bond has made me weak. Or it's made you wise, Sable countered. There's a difference between strength and stubbornness. Maybe acknowledging that change is necessary isn't weakness, it's intelligence. Before Valdris could respond, someone knocked sharply at the door. A female wolf entered without waiting for permission, tall, battle-scarred, with silver hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that assessed Sable like a threat to be neutralized. Your Majesty, she said, bowing slightly to Valdris but not taking her eyes off Sable. The Council of Alphas has requested an emergency session. They want to discuss the situation, Timaine. Situation, Valdris repeated dryly. Is that what we're calling my fated mate now, Commander Zara? I'm calling her what the Council called her, Zara replied bluntly, though their other suggestions were less polite. She finally addressed Sable directly. I'm Commander Zara, head of the Crimson Guard. My job is protecting His Majesty from threats, which apparently now includes protecting him from himself, since he's brought his prophesied destroyer into his own palace. Zara Valdris warned. No, it's fine, Sable interrupted. She's right to be suspicious. In her position, I'd be too. She met Zara's hard gaze steadily. But I'm not here to assassinate him in his sleep or whatever you're imagining. I'm here because the prophecy binds us together, and we're trying to figure out if there's a way to fulfill it without mass destruction. You'll forgive me if I don't find that particularly reassuring, Zara said. But orders are orders. You're the acknowledged mate, which means you're under my protection whether I like it or not. She shifted her attention to Valdris. The council meets in an hour. They're demanding her presence. Absolutely not, Valdris said immediately. She's been awakened for less than a week. She's not ready to face the council alphas. I think I should go, Sable said, surprising them both. Hiding me will only make them more suspicious. Besides, if I'm going to help transform your empire, I need to understand its politics. Valdris looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Sable's expression stopped him. Fine, but I'm not leaving you alone with them. And if anyone so much as threatens you, you'll do nothing, Sable interrupted firmly. Because if you fight my battles for me, you prove that I'm weak and need protecting. That reinforces exactly the hierarchy we're trying to change. Zara made a sound that might have been approval or choking. She's not wrong, Your Majesty. If you want the alphas to see her as anything other than a liability, she needs to face them without your interference. Valdris's jaw clenched, But he nodded reluctantly. The council chamber then. 1 hour. He looked at Sable with something like concern. These wolves are the most dominant alphas in the Northern Dominion. They've held power for decades, built their territories on strength and ruthlessness. They will try to break you. Good, Sable said with more confidence than she felt. Let's see if they're as unbreakable as they think they are. The council chamber was designed to intimidate. Circular, with 7 thrones arranged in a semicircle facing a single chair in the center, the position of judgment. Sable understood immediately. Anyone who sat in that center chair was meant to feel surrounded, outnumbered, vulnerable. She walked in alone, having insisted that Valdris enter separately to avoid the appearance that she needed his protection. The 7 alphas watched her approach, with expressions ranging from open hostility to calculated curiosity. So this is the famous throne breaker. One of them said, a massive wolf with scars covering half his face. She looks like a strong wind would knock her over. Looks can be deceiving. Alpha Torvin? Another responded, a female alpha with sharp features and sharper eyes. Though, I admit, I expected something more impressive. Sable took her seat in the judgment chair, refusing to show how intimidated she felt. Perhaps you should reserve your conclusions until you know what I can do. Oh, we know what you can do, Torvin said with heavy sarcasm. You can exist. You can have a scent despite being scentless. Very threatening. She can also make plants grow, another alpha added mockingly. Perhaps we should set her to work in the gardens. The council erupted in laughter, and Sable felt her power stirring in response to her anger. The earth beneath the chamber floor trembled slightly, just enough to make the laughter cut off abruptly. Gentlemen, ladies. Valdris entered then, his presence immediately dominating the space. You called this emergency session to discuss my mate. I'm here. Discuss. Valdris began Alpha Morgana, the sharp-eyed female. We mean no disrespect, but you must understand our concerns. You've claimed a mate based on prophecy, a prophecy that specifically states she'll destroy your throne. I'm aware of the prophecy, Valdris said dryly. I was there when the oracle delivered it. Then you understand why we question your judgment, Torvin said. You've brought a weapon into your own palace and called it a mate, power. You've given her access to the seat of power in the Northern Dominion. If she truly has the power, the prophecy claims, then she could destroy all of you right now. Sable interrupted quietly. But I haven't. Doesn't that suggest I might not be the mindless threat you're imagining? It suggests you're patient. Another alpha said, a younger wolf, named Kieran, who'd been silent until now, waiting for the right moment to strike. Sable stood, tired of being talked about like she wasn't in the room. Let me make something clear. The prophecy says I'll destroy thrones built on dominance and submission. It says I'll break hierarchies that crush wolves beneath them. It doesn't say I'll murder you all in your sleep. She looked at each alpha in turn. But if your thrones are built on cruelty, if your power comes from crushing those weaker than you, then yes, you should be afraid. Because I will tear down that kind of power structure. Thanks for watching. That's our entire society, Morgana said. Pack law is built on hierarchy, on dominance establishing order. Without that, we'd have chaos, power. You'd have equality, Sable corrected. And apparently, you find that more frightening than chaos. Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A messenger stumbled in, his clothes torn and bloody. Your Majesty, he gasped, collapsing to one knee. The border territories. Something's attacking them. Valdris was at the messenger's side instantly. Speak clearly. What kind of attack? Not wolves, Your Majesty. Something else. The messenger's eyes were wide with terror. They call themselves the Hollow. They're killing entire packs, but not for territory. They're taking something from the wolves they kill. Draining them somehow. The survivors say, it's like watching the life force itself being pulled out. Absolute silence fell over the council. Then everyone began talking at once, their voices overlapping in panic and anger. Order. Valdris's command cut through the chaos. How many territories affected? 3 confirmed, Your Majesty. Possibly more, Prive. The attack started 3 days ago, right after. The messenger trailed off, looking nervously at Sable. After I awakened, Sable finished quietly. These attacks started when my power manifested. It could be coincidence, Morgana said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it. Or it could be exactly what the prophecy warned about, Torvin said. She awakens, and immediately ancient threats emerge. Perhaps the throne breaking isn't the only disaster she brings. That's not fair, Kieran protested. She didn't cause these attacks. Didn't she? Torvin stood, his considerable bulk making him tower over the room. The old magic she carries disrupts the natural order. Perhaps these hollow things are responding to that disruption. Sable felt the council's attention turning hostile, blaming her for a threat she didn't understand. Her power stirred in response, and she had to fight to keep it contained. If she lost control now, she'd prove every fear they had about her. Enough speculation, Valdris said firmly. We need information, not finger-pointing. Zara, mobilize the Crimson Guard. I want scouts at every border, reports from every territory. If the Hollow are truly draining life force, we need to understand how and why before we can fight them. Your Majesty, the messenger said weakly. There's more. The survivors say the Hollow are being led by someone. A wolf who claims to be seeking the prophesied one. They say. He swallowed hard. They say they'll stop the attacks once the Thronebreaker is delivered to them. The council erupted again, this time with clear consensus. Sable was the problem, and removing her would solve it. You want to hand me over to monsters to save your territories, Sable said, her voice cutting through the shouting. That's your solution? It's expedient, Torvin said bluntly. One Omega's life versus thousands of pack wolves. The mathematics are simple, quote. The mathematics are irrelevant, Valdris snarled, his power flooding the room with such intensity that every alpha present dropped to one knee involuntarily. Sable is my acknowledged mate. Under pack law, harming her is the same as harming me. Anyone who suggests otherwise will answer to me personally. Valdris, be reasonable. Morgana began. I am being reasonable. The Hollow could be lying. Even if they're not, giving them what they want shows weakness. We don't negotiate with threats. He looked at Sable, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. We fight. With what? Torvin challenged, having recovered enough to speak. If these things can drain life force, how do we combat that? With the old magic. Esme's voice came from the doorway, the elderly woman having followed the messenger into the chamber. The power that created wolves in the first place. The only force strong enough to combat something that feeds on life itself. You mean her power, Morgana said, gesturing at Sable. The very power that might have attracted these things in the first place. Perhaps, Esme acknowledged. Or perhaps the Hollow were always coming, and Sable's awakening was time to give us a chance to fight them. Prophecy works both ways, you know. Not all of it is doom, some of it is preparation. Sable stood, her decision made. I'm going to the border territories. I'm going to see these Hollow for myself. Understand what we're facing. Absolutely not, Valdris said immediately. You can't stop me, Sable replied calmly. I'm not your subject, and you're not my alpha. We're mates, which means equals. So I'm going, and you can either come with me or stay here explaining to the council why you can't control your own mate. The challenge hung in the air. Every alpha in the room watched to see how Valdris would respond to such open defiance from someone who should be submissive. Slowly, a smile spread across the Crimson King's face, sharp and proud, and maybe a little bit feral. Then we leave at dawn. Zara, prepare a strike team. We're going hunting. The border territory was a graveyard. Sable stood at the edge of what had been a thriving pack settlement 2 days ago, and now nothing remained but silence and ash. Buildings stood intact, but empty. No bodies, no blood, just an absence so complete it felt like reality itself had been hollowed out. This is wrong, Zara said quietly, her hand resting on her weapon. When packs are attacked, there's evidence, bodies, destruction. This. She gestured at the pristine buildings. This is like they just disappeared. Valdris crouched, examining the ground. No scent markers, no territorial boundaries. It's like the pack never existed. He stood, his expression grim. The Hollow aren't just killing wolves. They're erasing them. Sable moved through the settlement, her newly awakened senses trying to find any trace of what had happened. Her connection to the old magic thrummed beneath her feet, the earth itself trying to tell her something she didn't know how to hear. Then she felt it a wrongness so profound it made her stomach turn. Not the absence of life, but something actively consuming where life should be. Like a void that grew hungrier the more it ate. "They're still here," Sable whispered, and everyone froze. "Where?" Valdris demanded, moving to her side instantly. "Everywhere, nowhere." Sable struggled to explain what she was sensing. "They're not physical in the way we understand. They're between. Like shadows that learn to cast themselves without needing light." As if summoned by her words, darkness began seeping from the buildings. Not normal darkness. This was active, writhing, forming shapes that almost resembled wolves, but were fundamentally wrong. Perceive. They had too many limbs, mouths that opened in places mouths shouldn't be, eyes that reflected nothing because they were nothing. "The hollow," Zara breathed, her weapon suddenly seeming very inadequate. There were dozens of them, emerging from every shadow, surrounding the strike team. The Crimson Guard formed a defensive circle, but Sable could sense their fear. How did you fight something that wasn't really there? Then the shadows parted, and a figure walked through them, a wolf, or something wearing a wolf's shape, beautiful in a terrible way, with silver fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, and eyes like empty voids. "The prophesied one," the hollow wolf said, its voice echoing from everywhere and nowhere. "You feel different than expected. More solid. We thought you would be like us, caught between existence and oblivion." "Who are you?" Sable demanded, fighting the urge to run. "We are what happens when prophecy fails," the creature replied. 500 years ago, another Thronebreaker was born. She had the power to change everything, just like you, but she was killed before she could fulfill her purpose. And when prophecy is thwarted, when the universe's attempt at balance is destroyed, it gestured to the hollow surrounding them. "The energy has to go somewhere. We are that somewhere. We are failed destiny given form." "You're killing innocent wolves," Valdris snarled. "We're trying to survive," the hollow wolf corrected. "We were never supposed to exist. We're an aberration, a mistake. And maintaining our existence requires consuming the life force of those who still belong to reality." Its void eyes focused on Sable. "Power, but you could fix us. The power you carry, the old magic, it could give us substance again, make us real." "By draining me the way you've drained the border packs?" Sable guessed. "A necessary sacrifice. One life to save hundreds of hours. And to prevent a second failure, because if you die before fulfilling your prophecy, you'll create more hollow. The cycle will continue, growing worse with each generation." The creature moved closer. "But if you come willingly, if you let us consume your power, we can end this. No more failed prophecies. No more hollow. Just peace." "Don't listen to it," Valdris growled. "We'll find another way." "Will you?" The hollow wolf tilted its head. "The Crimson King and his Thronebreaker. You're already destroying each other without our help. She awakens, and your empire begins to crumble. She grows stronger, and your authority weakens. The prophecy is already in motion." It looked at Sable. "But if you're gone, the prophecy ends. Valdris keeps his throne. The packs remain stable. Everyone wins." "Except Sable, who'd be dead," Zara said. "An acceptable loss." The casual dismissal of her life made Sable's power flare in response. Red light erupted around her, and the hollow closest to her shrieked, retreating from the old magic's intensity. "You fear my power," Sable observed. "That's why you're trying to negotiate instead of just taking it. You can't actually consume me. The old magic burns you." The hollow wolf's expression shifted to something that might have been respect, perceptive. "Yes, direct consumption would destroy us. But if you're willing, if you give the power freely, we can integrate it without being harmed." It stepped closer. And Sable noticed how reality seemed to distort around it, like looking through warped glass. "Please, we don't want to be monsters. We just want to exist." Sable felt genuine pity then, for these creatures born from tragedy, sustained by atrocity. They were victims as much as threats created by a system that destroyed those who tried to change it. Quote, "I won't give you my power," she said firmly, "but I won't let you continue killing innocent wolves either." She took a breath, making a decision that would either save everyone or doom them all. I'll help you become real again, but not by consuming me, by teaching you to reconnect with the old magic yourselves. That's impossible, the Hollow Wolf said. We're aberrations. The old magic rejects us. The old magic rejects consumption and dominance, Sable corrected, but it responds to need, to genuine transformation. You were wolves once, before prophecy failed. That connection still exists, you've just forgotten how to access it. She extended her hand, and red light flowed from her palm toward the Hollow Wolf. The creature jerked back, but Sable's power wasn't attacking, it was searching, reaching for whatever spark of wolf remained buried beneath the void. There, she breathed, finding it. You're still in there, the wolf you were before all this. Don't, the Hollow Wolf whispered, and for the first time, it sounded frightened rather than threatening. If you pull that out, if you force us to remember what we were, the guilt will destroy us. We've killed hundreds, consumed innocents. We can't face that. You can, Sable insisted. Because facing your actions is the first step toward redemption, and the old magic doesn't demand perfection, it demands honesty. She pulled harder, and the Hollow Wolf began to transform. The void darkness peeled away like layers of dead skin, revealing silver fur beneath. The creature screamed, but the sound shifted from inhuman to achingly familiar, the sound of a wolf in agony. When the transformation completed, a normal wolf stood before them, silver-furred and trembling. Around them, the other hollow began to shift as well, drawn by Sable's power into remembering their true forms. What have I done? The silver wolf whispered, looking at her hands as if seeing them for the first time in centuries. All those wolves, all that death. You survived the only way you knew how, Sable said gently. But now you have a choice. You can embrace the guilt and let it destroy you, or you can spend the rest of your existence trying to make amends. The silver wolf, once hollow, now restored, looked at her with something like worship. You gave us back our souls. We're in your debt. I don't want your debt, Sable replied. I want you to help rebuild the packs you destroyed. I want you to become living proof that even the worst failures can be redeemed. She looked at Valdris. That's what the prophecy really means. Not destroying everything, but transforming it. Not tearing down thrones, but changing what it means to hold power in the first place. Valdris stared at her, and she couldn't read his expression. Then, slowly, he nodded. You just saved my empire by refusing to let it stay as it was. That's... He laughed, and it sounded like wonder. That's exactly what the prophecy warned about, isn't it? My throne falls because you prove there's a better way to rule. I'm sorry, Sable said softly. Don't be. He stepped closer, taking her hand. I'm watching my life's work crumble, and I've never been more impressed with anyone. You're going to destroy everything I built, and then you're going to build something better. That's terrifying and magnificent in equal measure. Around them, wolves who'd been hollow minutes ago knelt in the ash, weeping for what they'd done and what they'd become. The border territory remained empty, but now there was hope that it could be filled again, not with the same wolves, but with something new. Sable had passed her test. She'd faced a threat that demanded sacrifice and found a solution that required transformation instead. The throne breaking had truly begun. Word of what happened at the border spread like wildfire through the northern dominion. The hollow restored, the border saved, and all because the prophesied thronebreaker had chosen redemption over destruction. Some alphas called it weakness, others called it wisdom. Most just called it terrifying, because if Sable could transform the hollow, what else might she transform? Restored wolves. They began calling themselves the Reclaimed, refused to leave Sable's side. 73 wolves who remembered centuries of existence as monsters, now desperate to atone for their actions. They became her unofficial guard, her witnesses, living proof that the old magic could heal even the most broken things. You've started a movement, Esme observed one evening, watching from the palace windows, as reclaimed wolves trained alongside Crimson Guard in the courtyards below. Not intentionally, perhaps, but movements rarely start with intention. They start with example. Sable sat curled in a chair, reading through accounts of pack law that Valdris had insisted she learn. I didn't mean to. I just couldn't let them continue killing. And in refusing to let them die or continue as monsters, you showed every wolf in the Northern Dominion that there's a third option between domination and destruction. Esme smiled. Do you understand what you've done? For centuries, pack law has been binary. You're either strong or weak, dominant or submissive, alpha or omega. You've proven that power can exist outside those categories. Over the following weeks, other wolves began arriving at the Crimson Court, first in trickles, then in waves. Omegas, who'd heard that the prophesied one was creating a new way. Betas, tired of being caught between alpha dominance and omega oppression. Even a few alphas who'd grown weary of maintaining power through fear alone. They came seeking answers, seeking hope, seeking proof that the whispered stories were true, that an omega had stood before the Crimson King as an equal, had transformed monsters into wolves again, had spoken of changing the very foundations of pack society. Valdris watched the growing congregation with mixed emotions. "My council is in chaos," he told Sable one night as they stood on his private balcony, the only place they could speak with being overheard. "Half of them want me to exile you immediately. The other half want me to use you as a weapon against territories that resist my rule." "And what do you want?" Sable asked, though she thought she knew. Over the past month, she'd learned to read him the way his jaw clenched when he was conflicted, the way his hands flexed when he wanted to act but forced himself to wait, the way his eyes softened when he looked at her and thought she wasn't paying attention. "I want to abdicate," Valdris said quietly, and the admission seemed to cost him something. "I want to walk away from this throne, from this empire, from the weight of 7 territories expecting me to be the unyielding forever." He looked at her. "I want to be just Valdris, not the Crimson King. I want to see where this movement of yours leads, without the burden of maintaining an empire that's built on everything you're trying to change." "But you won't," Sable said, understanding. "Because if you step down now, the power vacuum would be catastrophic. The alphas would go to war, trying to claim your territories." "Exactly." His smile was bitter. "So I'm trapped. The prophecy said you'd destroy my throne, but it turns out the cruelest destruction is making me realize I don't want it anymore, while forcing me to keep it anyway." Before Sable could respond, Zara appeared at the balcony entrance. "Your Majesty, we have a situation. Alpha Torvin has arrived with his entire war pack. He's demanding an audience." Valdris's expression hardened instantly, the king replacing the man who'd just been vulnerable with her. "How many warriors? How many warriors?" 300, armed and in formation." "That's not an audience request," Sable observed. "That's a siege preparation." They descended to the great hall to find Torvin waiting, his massive frame somehow taking up more space than physics should allow. His scarred face was set in lines of determination, and the warriors flanking him looked ready for violence. "Valdris," Torvin said, deliberately omitting the title. "I've come to present the will of the Northern Council. We've voted. Thank you for watching and we'll concede. When you cans together fility, while cans Sairon 5. Sairon for making Kaffin. When you cans to some celity in the live. When you cans to sis very sive. When you cans to some so. And when making the law." "Voted on what?" Valdris's voice was dangerously calm. "On whether you're fit to continue ruling the Dominion." Torvin produced a scroll, unrolling it with theatrical flourish. 4 alphas out of 7 have determined that your judgment is compromised. The mate bond has made you weak. You're allowing an omega to dictate policy, to gather followers, to spread sedition about changing pack law. "Sedition," Sable repeated. "Is that what we're calling equality now?" "Be silent," Torvin snapped at her. "Omegas speak when alphas permit it, not before." The red light that erupted from Sable wasn't intentional, it was pure instinct, her power responding to the attempted dominance. Torvin stumbled backward, his warriors drawing weapons before Valdris's power flooded the room with even greater intensity. "The next person who threatens my mate will lose their head," Valdris said quietly, and everyone believed him. "Torvin, you're testing my patience. What exactly is this vote supposed to accomplish?" "We're invoking the right of challenge," Torvin declared. 4 alphas challenge your authority as Crimson King. You'll face us in the traditional manner, 4 separate challenges, full combat, no assistance. Defeat us all, and we acknowledge your continued rule. Lose even one, and you abdicate immediately. The hall erupted in whispers. The right of challenge was ancient law, designed to prevent kings from holding power when they'd grown too weak to defend it. But 4 challenges in succession was brutally unfair. Even the strongest wolf would be exhausted by the 4th fight. That's not how the right of challenge works. Zara protested. It's supposed to be one challenger, with time for recovery before any subsequent challenges. The law doesn't specify timing, Torvin said with a cruel smile, and we're not feeling particularly generous. Valdris looked at the scroll, his expression unreadable. You realize that if I defeat all four of you, I'll have legal grounds to execute you for treason? Paired. If you defeat all four of us, we'll deserve execution, Torvin replied. But we both know you won't. You're already weakened by the mate bond, distracted by your Omega's idealistic fantasies. This is over, Valdris. Accept it gracefully. Cost him in. When? Valdris asked simply. Tomorrow at dawn. We'll give you that much one night to say goodbye to your throne. After Torvin left, the palace erupted in frantic preparation. Zara wanted to call in reinforcements, to simply arrest the challenging alphas before the fight could happen. The reclaimed offered to fight in Valdris's place, claiming they owed him for allowing their redemption. The gathered Omegas and Betas whispered about how this proved alphas would always resort to violence when their power was threatened. Sable found Valdris alone in his chambers, staring at the weapons he'd used in countless battles. You're going to lose, she said quietly. Yes. No denial, no false bravado. Torvin alone would be a difficult fight. 4 alpha challengers in succession? I'll be lucky to survive the third, let alone win. Then don't fight, Sable urged. Abdicate. Let them have the throne. And watch everything collapse into chaos? Valdris shook his head. Preta. If I step down under challenge, it proves that might makes right. Every alpha in the Dominion will interpret it as permission to solve disputes through violence. Your movement toward equality will die before it really begins. Then let me fight for you. He turned to her then, and she saw real fear in his eyes for the first time since they'd met. Absolutely not. The moment you enter that challenge circle, every alpha in the Dominion will see you as a direct threat. They'll unite against you, and even your power won't be enough against 7 territories working together. So you're just going to die? Sable's voice cracked. Accept defeat because the alternative is unacceptable? I'm going to fight, Valdris corrected. And I'm going to make them work for their victory. Maybe I'll survive. Maybe the council will show mercy. His smile said he didn't believe either option. Or maybe the prophecy finally reaches its conclusion. My throne falls, and you build something better from the ruins. That's not what I want, Sable whispered. I know. He crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. But wanting doesn't change destiny. The oracle told me years ago that meeting you would be the beginning of my end. I chose to meet you anyway, because some things are worth ending for. That night, as Valdris slept fitfully before his challenges, Sable sat with Esme and the Reclaimed, searching desperately for a solution that didn't end in his death, or her exposing herself to united alpha hostility. The old magic responds to necessity, Esme said thoughtfully. You transformed the Hollow because they needed redemption. Perhaps the same principle applies here. What does Valdris need? Sable asked. Not Valdris. One of the Reclaimed, said the Silver Wolf, who'd been the Hollow leader. Her name was Mirren, and she'd become Sable's most devoted follower, the Northern Dominion. Persen. The entire system needs transformation, not just one king's survival. I don't understand, Sable admitted. The right of challenge exists to prevent weak kings from holding power, Mirren explained. But what if the definition of strength changed? What if instead of 4 combat challenges, Valdris faced 4 tests that proved different kinds of strength? The law is specific, Esme countered. Full combat, no assistance. We can't change those terms. Esme countered. Esme countered. Esme countered. But who defines combat? Mirren's eyes gleamed. Physical fighting is one form. But there are others. Strength of wisdom. Strength of compassion. Strength of purpose. What if we invoked the older laws, the ones that existed before pack structure became so rigid? Sable's mind raced. The ancient accords, the laws that governed wolves before alphas claimed absolute authority. Exactly, Mirren said. Those laws are still technically valid, they were never officially revoked, just ignored. And they state that challenges can take any form agreed upon by both parties. Torvin will never agree to change the terms, Sable said. Then we don't ask Torvin. Esme's smile was sharp. We invoke the right of the challenged to define combat's form. It's ancient law, predating the council by centuries. Valdris can declare that each challenge will test a different aspect of leadership strength. It was brilliant and absolutely terrifying. If they succeeded, they'd force the council to acknowledge that strength meant more than physical dominance. If they failed, they'd be accused of trying to subvert tradition, which would turn even more alphas against them. Valdris will never agree to this, Sable said. He'll see it as hiding behind technicalities. Then we don't tell him until the challenge begins. Mirren suggested. Sometimes the best way to save a stubborn king is to save him despite himself. Sable looked at the gathered faces. Wolves who'd been monsters and chose redemption. Wolves who'd been oppressed and chose resistance. All of them waiting to see if she'd make the decision that would either change everything or doom them all. We do it, she said finally. We invoke the ancient accords and redefine what strength means. Dawn came too quickly. The challenge grounds had been prepared a massive circle marked in silver sand, with the council alphas seated on raised platforms around the perimeter. Hundreds of wolves gathered to witness their excitement palpable. This would either be a coronation of new leadership or proof that the Crimson King's reign was finally over. Valdris entered the circle alone, his expression set for battle. He'd armed himself with twin blades, weapons he'd carried through countless fights. He looked magnificent and doomed in equal measure. Torvin stepped into the circle first, his massive war axe catching the morning light. Ready to lose your throne, Valdris? Thank you for watching. Yself for watching the Sardif. This no tearing the ma. He was also for Matif. He was no parentelating into it so's. Before we begin, Sable's voice rang out across the grounds, and every head turned to her. She'd positioned herself at the circle's edge, flanked by the reclaimed and Esme. I invoke the ancient accords, which predate the council's authority. Under those laws, the challenged has the right to define combat's form. What nonsense is this? Torvin snarled. The right of challenge is clear. The right of challenge, as you understand it, is 300 years old. Esme interrupted, producing an ancient tome that looked like it might crumble to dust any moment. But the laws governing alpha challenges are over 1,000 years old. And those laws state that combat can take any form, both parties agree, demonstrates leadership strength. I don't agree to any changes, Torvin said flatly. You don't have to, Sable replied. Valdris does. As the challenged party, he has the right to declare what form each challenge will take. You can either accept his terms or withdraw your challenge entirely. Valdris stared at her, understanding and frustration warring on his face. Sable. You taught me that a good leader uses every advantage available, Sable said, meeting his eyes. That adapting to circumstances is what separates survivors from martyrs. So stop being stubborn and use the law to your advantage. A long moment passed. Then Valdris smiled sharp and proud and maybe a little bit relieved. Very well. I accept the ancient accord's terms. He looked at Torvin. First challenge? Combat of wisdom. We'll debate pack law and leadership philosophy. The council will judge who presents the stronger argument. That's not a real fight, Torvin protested. It's a test of mental strength, Valdris countered. Or are you admitting that your leadership is based solely on physical power, that you have no wisdom to offer beyond might makes, right? The trap was perfect. If Torvin refused, he'd look like a brute who couldn't defend his positions intellectually. If he accepted, he'd have to argue against someone who'd been ruling 7 territories for years. Torvin's jaw clenched. Fine. But the other 3 challenges remain traditional combat. The second challenge will test compassion, Valdris continued, ignoring him. We'll each be presented with a crisis requiring leadership decision. The council judges who chooses the path that best serves their pack. Third challenge. Adaptability. Sable added, following the plan they'd frantically outlined. A simulation of unexpected threats. Whoever responds most effectively wins. And the fourth, Valdris finished, will be traditional combat. You'll get your fight, Torvin. But only after proving you have the other qualities necessary for leadership. The council alphas conferred urgently. This was unprecedented, but the ancient accords were valid law. If they rejected it, they'd be admitting that law only mattered when it served their purposes, a dangerous precedent. Finally, Alpha Morgana stood. The council accepts these terms, under one condition. If Valdris loses any of the first 3 challenges, the fourth becomes combat not just with Torvin, but with all four challengers simultaneously. It was a poisoned compromise, but Valdris nodded. Agreed. What followed was unlike any challenge the Northern Dominion had ever witnessed. Valdris and Torvin debated for hours, their arguments dissected by the council. Torvin argued for traditional hierarchy, for the natural order of alpha dominance. Valdris countered with examples of how rigid hierarchy created brittleness, how the strongest packs were those that valued all members. The council ruled in Valdris's favor, though barely. The second challenge was even more revealing. Both leaders were presented with an identical crisis, a pack member accused of theft, with evidence suggesting guilt, but circumstances suggesting desperation. Torvin chose punishment exile as a warning to others. Valdris chose investigation and support, discovering that the thief was stealing food for orphan pups and addressing the underlying failure of pack care systems. The council ruled for Valdris again, and now even Torvin's supporters looked uncertain. The third challenge nearly cost Valdris everything. An elaborate simulation of pack threats, rogue attacks, resource shortages, internal conflicts, all happening simultaneously. Torvin responded with pure alpha dominance, asserting control and crushing opposition. It was efficient but brutal. Valdris responded by delegating, empowering his team members, coordinating a response that utilized everyone's strengths. The council split evenly. 3 votes for Torvin's efficiency, 3 for Valdris's adaptability, 1 abstention from Morgana, who looked deeply troubled by what she was witnessing. Split decision, Torvin said with grim satisfaction. The terms stated that if you lose any challenge, you face all 4 of us in combat. A tie counts as a loss. No, Morgana said slowly, her voice carrying across the suddenly silent grounds. A tie means both approaches have merit. Which suggests She paused, seeming to come to a decision that would change her life. Which suggests that perhaps we've been defining strength too narrowly. I change my vote. Valdris wins the third challenge. You can't do that, one of Torvin's allies shouted. I'm an alpha of the Northern Council. Morgana said coldly. I can vote however my conscience dictates. And my conscience says that if Valdris can demonstrate wisdom, compassion, and adaptability while Torvin can only demonstrate force, then Valdris has proven himself the stronger leader by any meaningful definition. Torvin's face went purple with rage. This is a betrayal. You're all fools, seduced by an Omega's pretty words about equality. Fine. Possession. We'll settle this the old way. He drew his war axe. 4th challenge. Combat. Me versus the unyielding, and we'll see whose philosophy survives. The fight was brutal and brief. Torvin fought with the rage of someone watching their worldview crumble. Valdris fought with the precision of someone who'd already won everything that mattered and was simply finishing formalities. When Valdris's blade found Torvin's throat, the big alpha froze. Yield? Valdris asked quietly. Never, Torvin spat. Then I'll make you. Valdris's power crashed down, forcing Torvin to his knees through sheer dominance. But then he did something that made every watching wolf gasp. He released that power, stepped back, and offered his hand. Or you can yield with dignity, acknowledge that leadership requires more than physical strength, and help build something better than the system that created this conflict. Your choice. Torvin stared at the offered hand like it was a snake. Then, slowly, he took it. I yield, he rasped. And I acknowledge that perhaps there's wisdom in what you're building. The challenge grounds erupted. Some wolves cheered, others looked horrified, most simply looked confused, as if the fundamental laws of reality had been rewritten before their eyes. Sable pushed through the crowd to reach Valdris, who looked exhausted but triumphant. You didn't have to offer him redemption, she said. I learned from the best, Valdris replied, pulling her close despite the watching crowd. You showed me that strength isn't about crushing opponents, it's about transforming them into allies. So that's what I'm doing. Transforming my empire, one challenge at a time. Your throne didn't fall, Sable observed. No, Valdris agreed. It evolved, which I suspect was the prophecy's real intention all along. Not destruction for its own sake, but transformation, because the old ways couldn't survive contact with you. He kissed her forehead gently. You're going to reshape the entire Northern Dominion, and I have the privilege of watching it happen. We're going to reshape it, Sable corrected. Together, as equals. And in that moment, with the watching crowd and the transformed challenges, and the reclaimed wolves standing guard, and the dawn light breaking over mountains that had seen centuries of pack law, the prophecy reached its true fulfillment. Not a throne destroyed, but a throne transformed. Not a king dethroned, but a king evolved. The revolution had begun, and it looked nothing like anyone expected. News of the Transform Challenge spread throughout the Northern Dominion like wildfire, but not everyone celebrated. 3 weeks after Valdris's victory, reports began flooding in from the outer territories. Alphas who rejected the new definition of strength were rallying together, forming a coalition dedicated to preserving traditional pack values. They're calling themselves the Old Guard, Zara reported during an emergency strategy session. 7 alphas from territories beyond our immediate jurisdiction. Plus, they've declared that Valdris has been compromised by the mate bond, and they're marching to liberate the Dominion from Omega influence. Valdris studied the map of troop movements with a calculating expression. 7 alphas means roughly 2,000 warriors, maybe more if they've recruited from smaller packs. When do they reach our borders? And when? 4 days, Zara replied grimly. And they're not just coming for you, they've specifically demanded Sable's execution. They're calling her a corruption of natural law, claiming she's using forbidden magic to undermine pack structure. Forbidden magic, Sable repeated bitterly. You mean the old magic that literally created wolves in the first place? Facts don't matter to zealots, Morgana observed. She'd joined the strategy sessions after her vote in Valdris's favor, effectively switching sides in the Dominion's growing ideological divide. The Old Guard sees the world changing, and they're terrified. Terrified wolves are the most dangerous kind. Over the following days, the Crimson Court transformed into a fortress. Warriors from loyal territories began arriving, including to everyone's surprise Torvin and his warpack. I made a choice, Torvin said gruffly when questioned about his presence. To follow strength wherever it leads, not just where tradition says to look. Valdris proved his strength. The Old Guard are proving their fear. Easy decision, really, pretty power. But even with reinforcements, they were outnumbered. The Old Guard had recruited well, playing on ancient prejudices about Omegas, about the natural order, about the dangers of change. Wolves who'd spent their entire lives believing in rigid hierarchy weren't going to abandon that belief without a fight. We could retreat, someone suggested during one planning session. Fall back to the inner territories, make them chase us through terrain we know better. And abandon thousands of wolves to the Old Guard's mercy? Sable shook her head. They'll burn every settlement that's embraced the new ways, kill or enslave anyone who's spoken about equality. No, we stand here. We can't win through conventional combat, Valdris said, his military mind analyzing angles. They outnumber us too significantly. We'd need something that changes the fundamental nature of the battlefield itself. Sable thought of the Hollow, of how she transformed them not through fighting but through reaching the truth beneath their corrupted forms. An idea began forming dangerous, possibly insane, but maybe the only option they had. What if we don't fight them at all? She said slowly. What if instead, we show them? Show them what? Zara asks. Everything. What the new way actually means. Not through words or philosophy, but through direct experience. Sable looked at Esme. The old magic can create connections, right? Show truth in ways that can't be denied? Esme's eyes widened with understanding. You want to link every wolf on that battlefield to the old magic itself. Let them feel what you feel, see what you see. Experience directly why the hierarchy needs to change, Ka said. That's never been done, Morgana said. The scale alone, linking thousands of minds simultaneously, would require more power than any single wolf possesses. Good thing I'm not alone. Sable looked around the room at the faces gathered there. The reclaimed, who'd been monsters and chose redemption. Valdris, who'd been a tyrant and chose evolution. Torvin, who'd been a traditionalist and chose growth. Morgana, who'd been complicit and chose courage. Everyone in this room has transformed themselves. That transformation creates power, the power of change accepted rather than resisted. If we all channel that together, you'll either show the Old Guard the truth and transform them, Valdris finished, Or you'll burn out every mind on the battlefield, including your own. Probably, Sable admitted. But what's the alternative? We fight, thousands die, and even if we win, we prove that might makes right. We validate everything the old guard believes. This way, at least we give peace a chance. Valdris looked like he wanted to argue, but Esme spoke first. The girl is right. Sometimes the only way to prove strength is through vulnerability. The old magic was never meant for combat, it was meant for connection. If we use it as it was intended, we honor its purpose. The planning that followed was intricate and terrifying. They would let the old guard approach, let them form their battle lines, let them believe they were about to crush the Dominion's corruption. Then, at the moment of maximum commitment, Sable would activate the connection linking every wolf present to the old magic's network, forcing them to experience reality from perspectives other than their own. You'll need anchors, Mirren explained, drawing diagrams that looked like spiritual architecture, wolves positioned throughout the battlefield to ground the connection, to prevent the power from becoming overwhelming. The reclaimed will take those positions we're already accustomed to existing between states. We can handle the intensity. And you'll need a focus, Esme added. Someone to channel the power through, to direct the connection where it needs to go. That will have to be Valdris. Why me? Valdris asked. Because you're the Crimson King. Your presence carries weight, authority. The old guard might reject Sable's truth, but they can't ignore yours. Esme looked at him seriously. You'll need to open yourself completely, every memory, every doubt, every moment of transformation. Let them see why you chose to change, what you learned from choosing differently. It will be invasive, painful. There will be no secrets left when this is done. Valdris met Sable's eyes. An entire conversation passed between them without words. Then he nodded. If complete vulnerability is what's required to prevent mass slaughter, then that's what I'll give. The day of the confrontation dawned cold and clear. The old guard's forces spread across the valley, in perfect military formation, 2,000 strong, armor gleaming, weapons ready. At their head rode the 7 alphas, their combined dominance making the very air feel heavy. Valdris's forces looked small by comparison, even with reinforcements. But they spread out in a pattern that looked more like a ritual circle than battle formation, with the reclaimed positioned at key points around the perimeter. The old guard's leader, a massive alpha named Draken, rode forward under a parley flag. Valdris, the compromised, he called out, his voice carrying across the valley. Surrender the Omega and abdicate your throne. Do this, and we'll allow your followers to live. Resist, and we'll water these fields with your blood. I have a counteroffer, Valdris called back. Lower your weapons and open your minds. Let us show you what you're really fighting against. If after that you still want war, we'll give it to you. Draken laughed. Show us? More Omega tricks? We didn't march for 3 weeks to watch a performance. Then you marched for 3 weeks to close your minds while claiming to protect tradition, Sable said, stepping forward to stand beside Valdris. The old guard. What are you guarding, really? Power? Privilege? The right to crush those weaker than you? We guard the natural order, one of the other alphas shouted. The hierarchy that has sustained wolfkind for millennia. A hierarchy that creates monsters like the Hollow, Sable countered. A hierarchy that forces wolves to be something they're not, that destroys those who don't fit its narrow definitions. That's not tradition worth preserving, that's trauma being passed down through generations. 8. Enough talk, Draken snarled. You have 1 minute to surrender, or we attack. Sable looked at Esme, who nodded. At Mirren and the Reclaimed, who took their positions. At Valdris, who reached for her hand. At every wolf who'd chosen transformation over stagnation, who'd proven that strength came in forms beyond domination. Then let's show them, she said, and released her power. The old magic erupted from her like a tidal wave, spreading across the battlefield faster than thought. It flowed through the reclaimed anchors, magnified by their transformed natures, and connected to every wolf present. Alpha, Beta, Omega designation didn't matter. The connection ignored hierarchy entirely, linking them all to the fundamental network of existence itself. And then, through Valdris as a focus, they experienced everything. The old guard warriors felt what it was like to be Omega, to live every day knowing you were considered lesser. They felt years of abuse, of humiliation, of having your basic worth questioned constantly. They felt Sable's childhood, her mother's sacrifice, the cold cellar floor and empty stomach, and the desperate hope that maybe tomorrow would be different. But they also felt transformation, felt the moment Valdris chose to see his mate as an equal rather than a subordinate, felt Torvin's realization that strength and wisdom weren't opposing forces, felt the reclaimed, discovering that redemption was possible even for the worst monsters. Felt hundreds of small moments where wolves chose connection over dominance, compassion over cruelty. They felt the old magic itself, ancient, patient, devastatingly sad about what its creations had become. Disappointed that wolves had taken the gift of pack bonds and turned them into chains, but also hopeful, because change was happening, evolution was occurring. The children were finally growing up. The connection lasted maybe 5 minutes in real time, but it felt like hours. When Sable finally released it, she collapsed, her power completely spent. Valdris caught her, barely able to stand himself. The reclaimed dropped to their knees, exhausted by the effort of maintaining the anchors. Across the battlefield, 2,000 wolves stood in absolute silence. Some were weeping, others looked shell-shocked, their entire worldviews shattered in an instant. Many had dropped their weapons without even realizing it. Draken dismounted slowly, walking toward Valdris and Sable with an expression that was impossible to read. When he reached them, he did something that made every watching wolf gasp. He knelt. "I felt what she felt," Draken said quietly. "I felt what you felt. I felt." He looked up, and there were tears streaming down his scarred face. "I felt my own son, the Omega I exiled 3 years ago because he couldn't meet my standards of strength. I felt what I did to him through your memories of what Ironveil did to you. And I..." His voice broke. "I understand now. What we've been doing. What I've been doing. It's not strength, it's fear wearing strength's mask." One by one, other wolves began kneeling. Not submission, something different. Acknowledgement. Recognition. The beginning of understanding. "The old magic doesn't lie," one of the other alphas said, her voice shaking. "We felt the truth. We can't unfeel it. And now we have to decide what we do with that knowledge." "You build something better," Sable managed to say, despite her exhaustion. "That's what you do. You take every moment of pain you caused and you use it as a blueprint for what not to do. You transform your packs the way Valdris transformed his reign. It won't be easy. It won't be fast. But it's possible. We've proven that much." Draken stood, but his posture had changed, less aggressive, more open. "What you're asking for this transformation, it means admitting we were wrong. For years, decades, some of us for our entire lives, that's..." He struggled for words. "That's harder than any battle." "I know," Valdris said. "Believe me, I know, but the alternative is worse. Continue as you were, and watch your pack slowly crumble from internal rot. Or change now, while you still can, and build something that lasts beyond your lifetime." The old guard alphas conferred quietly among themselves. The army behind them waited, equally affected by the connection they'd all experienced. Finally, Draken spoke for all of them. "We accept your terms, not surrender partnership. We'll return to our territories and begin the work of transformation. It won't happen overnight. There will be resistance, wolves who refuse to change. But after what we felt today..." He looked at Sable with something like reverence. "How can we return to ignorance after experiencing truth?" As the old guard departed, their army significantly less military in formation, Valdris turned to Sable. "You did it. You defeated an army without a single casualty." "We did it," Sable corrected, leaning against him because standing was becoming impossible. "This was never about me alone. It was about proving that connection is stronger than dominance, that vulnerability is braver than aggression, that transformation is possible for anyone willing to face themselves honestly." "The prophecy is fulfilled," Esme observed, joining them. "The throne didn't fall, it evolved," the Crimson King. "Remains, but he's no longer unyielding. He's adaptable. And that's a far more dangerous kind of strength than anything that came before." Valdris looked out over the valley where battle had been prevented, where minds had been changed instead of lives being ended. "What happens now?" "Now?" Sable smiled despite her exhaustion. "Now, The real work begins. Because changing a few minds on a battlefield is one thing, transforming an entire society? That's going to take everything we have. Good, Valdris said, his arm tightening around her waist. I'd hate for things to get boring, Persinus. 2 years after the battle that wasn't, Sable stood in what had once been Ironvale's territory and marveled at the transformation. The pack structures had been dismantled, not destroyed, but fundamentally reorganized. Power. Instead of a single alpha dominating from the top, leadership was shared among a council that included representatives from every designation. Omegas sat beside alphas at decision-making tables. Betas who'd spent their lives caught between extremes now led innovative projects. The change was messy, imperfect, and absolutely revolutionary. It's slow work, Esme observed, joining Sable on the hill overlooking the settlement. The elderly woman moved with more difficulty now, her years finally catching up to her. But it's real work, sustainable work. You've given them a foundation that can last beyond any single leader. Across the Northern Dominion, similar transformations were occurring at different speeds. Valdris's territories had adapted fastest, with the Crimson Court becoming a model for the new pack structure. The former Old Guard territories were slower, still struggling with deeply ingrained hierarchies, but showing genuine progress. Even packs that had initially resisted were beginning to experiment with shared leadership models. Not everyone was happy about the changes. There were packs in the far territories that rejected the new ways entirely, that clung to traditional hierarchies, and actively persecuted any Omega who spoke about equality. Those packs were becoming increasingly isolated as the rest of the Dominion evolved around them. We can't force them to change, Valdris had said during one particularly frustrating council session. We can only make the alternative so appealing that eventually, their own wolves choose to leave for territories that treat them better. Empty the old hierarchies from the bottom up. And that's exactly what was happening. Young wolves, especially Omegas and lower-ranked Betas, were migrating in waves to territories that had embraced transformation. The old pack structures were slowly being starved of new members, leaving aging alphas to realize that dominance without followers was just lonely autocracy. Sable's role had evolved too. She wasn't a queen she'd refused that title repeatedly. Instead, she'd become something like an ambassador, traveling between territories to help facilitate transitions, to teach about the old magic, to remind wolves that strength came in many forms. The reclaimed accompanied her always, living proof that even the worst corruption could be healed. Do you regret it? Valdris asked one evening as they stood together on the palace balcony, watching the sun set over mountains that had witnessed centuries of pack law. Destroying my throne, even if it meant building something else in its place? I didn't destroy your throne, Sable corrected. I helped you realize you were sitting on a throne built from bones and calling it strong. What we built together is stronger because it's built from choice, from shared purpose, from connection instead of domination. Still, Valdris insisted, you gave up being able to just live your life quietly. You could have taken your freedom and walked away. Instead, you took on the burden of transforming an entire society. I took on the opportunity, Sable said firmly, because I remember what it was like to be worthless in everyone's eyes, including my own. And if I can prevent even one Omega from growing up the way I did, from believing they're broken because they're different, she trailed off, emotions tightening her throat. That's not a burden, that's a privilege. Movement below caught their attention. A group of young wolves engaged in what looked like a training session, but fundamentally different from traditional pack training. Alphas and Omegas working together, teaching each other their respective strengths rather than one dominating the other. A beta instructor was showing an alpha how to use strategy instead of pure force. While an Omega demonstrated to other Omegas that they didn't have to accept abuse as natural. Your mother would be proud. Esme's voice came from the doorway. Vera sacrificed herself, believing that someday, somehow, her daughter would have a chance at something better. She never imagined you'd create something better for everyone. I hope she's watching, Sable said softly, along with every other wolf who was crushed by the old hierarchies, who died believing they were less than. I hope they can see that their suffering wasn't meaningless, that it became the foundation for something transformative. Over the following months, Sable began documenting everything, writing down the principles of the old magic, recording the stories of transformation, comprehensive guide for future generations. The work was exhausting but necessary. She'd learned that knowledge not passed on was knowledge lost, and she refused to let the lessons of this revolution die with her generation. "You're creating a new kind of pack law," Morgana observed during one of their regular strategy sessions. The former Council Alpha had become one of Sable's closest advisors, her sharp political mind essential for navigating the complex reality of system-wide transformation. One based on principles rather than power, on negotiation rather than dominance. "I'm creating options," Sable corrected. "Every pack can choose how to structure itself, as long as that structure doesn't permit systematic abuse of any designation. Some packs will keep modified alpha leadership. Others will experiment with complete consensus models. The point isn't to force uniformity, it's to ensure that wherever a wolf ends up, their basic worth is acknowledged." The resistance movements, because there were several, despite the old guard's transformation, continued to test these principles. A coalition of traditionalist alphas attempted a coordinated assault on multiple reformed territories, hoping to overwhelm them through simultaneous attacks. Pow! But they underestimated how much the new pack structures had strengthened defensive capabilities. When alphas couldn't simply order omega wolves to their deaths, when every wolf had genuine investment in their pack's survival rather than fear-based compliance, the resulting defensive coordination was devastatingly effective. The traditionalists' assault failed within days, not through superior violence but through superior cooperation. "They're learning," Zara reported, after the failed assault. "The hard way, but they're learning. You can't conquer a pack whose members genuinely want to defend it. You can only conquer packs held together by fear, because fear dissolves under pressure." 3 years after her awakening, Sable stood before a gathering unlike any the Northern Dominion had ever witnessed, representatives from every pack, every designation, every territory. They'd come to formally ratify the new accords, a comprehensive revision of pack law that enshrined the principles of designation, equality, and shared power structures. "This isn't the end," Sable told them, her voice carrying across the massive amphitheater. "This is barely the beginning. We've changed laws, but laws don't change hearts. That's the work of generations, teaching our children that different doesn't mean lesser. That strength comes in countless forms. That pack bonds are strongest when they're chosen rather than enforced." She looked out at the gathered faces, seeing hope and uncertainty mixed in equal measure. "Some of you will face resistance in your territories. Wolves, who resist change, who cling to the old ways out of fear or habit or genuine belief that hierarchy is natural. Be patient with them, but don't be passive. Show them through your actions that the new way works. That packs built on mutual respect are stronger than packs built on fear." The vote to ratify the new accords was overwhelming, not unanimous, because unity demanded honest dissent rather than forced conformity, but clear enough that even the most skeptical wolf had to acknowledge the mandate for change. That evening, as celebrations erupted throughout the Dominion, Sable found Valdris standing alone in the gardens, staring up at the moon with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Regrets?" she asked, joining him. "Relief," he corrected, passive. "For years, I carried the weight of 7 territories alone, believing that showing any weakness would mean losing everything. Now?" He gestured toward the celebration, sounds drifting from the palace. "Now that weight is shared among hundreds of leaders, I can actually rest, knowing that if something happens to me, the system won't collapse. That's..." He laughed softly. "That's the greatest gift you've given me. Not destroying my throne, freeing me from having to hold it alone." "We freed each other," Sable said, taking his hand. "You freed me from believing I was worthless. I freed you from believing strength meant standing alone. That's what mates do, I think. We help each other become better versions of ourselves." Months turned to years, and the transformation continued. Not smoothly, there were setbacks, territories that regressed, conflicts that had to be mediated. Moments when it seemed like the old hierarchies would reassert themselves through sheer momentum. But each time, the growing network of transformed packs pushed back, reminded each other why they'd chosen change, supported each other through difficult transitions. Sable's role gradually shifted from revolutionary to teacher, from disruptor to mentor. Young wolves who'd grown up under the new systems came to her seeking guidance on how to maintain what had been built. She told them about the cold cellar floors, the empty stomachs, the years of believing she was broken. She told them these stories, not to make them pity her, but to ensure they understood how precious and fragile this new world was. Never forget, she told a group of young leaders during one teaching session, that someone, somewhere, is still living in that cellar. Still being told they're worthless. Your job, all of our jobs, is to reach into those cellars and pull them out. To show them that the lies they've been told about their worth are just that. Lies. That's how we prevent regression. That's how we ensure this transformation outlasts all of us. 5 years after her awakening, Sable discovered she was pregnant. The news sent ripples of excitement and concern through the Dominion. What designation would the child of a moon-blessed Omega and the Crimson King carry? Would they inherit the old magic? Would they be a target for remaining traditionalists? They'll be themselves, Valdris said firmly when asked. Alpha, Beta, Omega, something entirely new, it doesn't matter. They'll be raised, knowing their worth isn't tied to their designation. That's the world we've built for them. When the child was born, a daughter with Sable's dark hair and Valdris's silver eyes, she presented as Omega at birth, her scent gentle and calming. Some traditionalists whispered that it was proof the bloodline was weak. Reformed Pax celebrated it as proof that Omegas could come from the most powerful unions without being considered lesser. Sable named her daughter Vera, after the grandmother who'd sacrificed everything so that this moment could exist. And as she held the tiny Omega pup, who would grow up never knowing what it felt like to be considered defective, who would be raised by an Alpha King, who'd learned to measure strength by wisdom and compassion, Sable finally understood what the prophecy had really meant, Ponsi. She hadn't destroyed the throne, she'd transformed what it meant to sit on one. She hadn't broken hierarchy, she'd expanded its definition to include kinds of strength that had always existed but had never been acknowledged. She hadn't torn down the Northern Dominion. She'd helped it evolve into something that could survive and thrive into the future. Tell me the story. Young Vera, said years later, curled in her mother's lap, while Valdris worked on correspondence, and the Reclaimed stood guard outside, bro. About the Red Moon and the Throne Breaker. Once upon a time, Sable began, as she had so many times before, there was an Omega who everyone believed was worthless. She couldn't produce a scent, which meant she couldn't bond, which meant she couldn't truly be part of her pack. But now when she told the story, it ended differently. Not with destruction but with transformation. Not with a throne falling but with a throne evolving. Not with one wolf's victory but with a society's growth. And they lived happily ever after? Vera asked, as children always did. They lived honestly ever after, Sable corrected. Which isn't always happy, but it's always real. They faced challenges, made mistakes, had to keep working every day to maintain what they'd built. But they did it together, and that made all the difference. Valdris looked up from his work, catching her eye across the room. No words were necessary. They'd destroyed his throne together by proving that thrones didn't have to be built on dominance. They'd fulfilled the prophecy by refusing to accept that destruction was the only option. They'd broken the old ways by showing that something better was possible. Under the Red Moon, the Alpha King had found the Omega destined to destroy his throne, and in losing that throne, he'd gained something infinitely more valuable. A world where thrones weren't necessary, where power was shared, where every wolf Alpha to Omega could discover their true worth. Prophecy. The prophecy was fulfilled, the revolution was ongoing, and the story would continue for generations, told by children who would never know what it was like to live in a world where designation determined destiny. That was the real victory. Not changing the present, but ensuring the future would be different. Not destroying what was, but building what could be. The Thronebreaker had become the throne builder, and that made all the difference.